Yes, it is. Welcome in, Warriors Live. I'm Mark Randy with you here on 95.7 The Game as we gear up for Warriors and Spurs from San Antonio. Tip off a little more than an hour away. I've got you covered until the bottom of the hour at 3:30. Then I'll hand things off to Tim Roy. He'll take you up to till tip-off. And then I've got you covered for Warriors wrap-up once this thing is over tonight in the Alamo City down in San Antonio. It is Warriors Live presented by Xfinity. Stream sports from the best seat in the house. With Xfinity, bring on the good stuff. The Warriors' 6-game road trip continues today. They're 1-2 so far. Losses in Atlanta and Miami. A win last time out on Friday in New Orleans. San Antonio tonight. Memphis on Tuesday. And Memphis, interesting what's going on there right now as they fire their head coach, Taylor Jenkins, on Friday. And then they close out the road trip on Thursday by visiting LeBron, Luka, and the Lakers. But an important game today for the Warriors because given a result that just went final in Cleveland, the Warriors can put some space between them and the Clippers for the 6th seed in the Western Conference. Just moments ago, the Clippers lost to the Cavs in Cleveland. Final score 127-122. So that means for the moment, the Warriors are alone in 6th in the Western Conference once again. The loss for the Clippers puts their record down to 42-32, which is identical to the T-Wolves, 42-32. The T-Wolves do play in an hour as well as they host Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons. But that loss for the Clippers means the Warriors are now currently a half game ahead of the Clippers, which means the result of today's game is either going to extend that lead to a full game or these two teams, the Warriors and the Clippers, are going to have identical records once again. And the Clippers will have the tiebreaker there. And if you throw in a Minnesota win as well, if Minnesota wins and the Warriors lose, the Warriors could be down in the 8th seed after today's action. But if they win, they will be a full game ahead of the Clippers and either a half game or a game and a half ahead of the T-Wolves, regardless of what Minnesota does. If the Warriors win today, they are the 6th seed. They would be the 6th seed, and that would be a 43-31 record, which means there would only be 8 games left for the Warriors, and they would have the leg up on the Clippers and the T-Wolves for the 6th seed in the Western Conference. I'll run through some of the other important games around the West in just a second, but let's focus here for a bit on the San Antonio Spurs. They're on the outside looking in, and they're not going to be a postseason or a play-in team. They're 31-42, 13th best record in the West. They're 4.5 games behind the Kings, who are the 10th seed, the 4th and final spot in the play-in tournament. The Spurs have given up on trying to make the postseason this year. Again, they acquired De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline, and then they were going for it a bit. And then Victor Wembanyama went down with a strange injury, deep vein thrombosis in his shoulder, which is essentially a blood clot. He's been out for the season for a while now. De'Aaron Fox, shortly after that, needed surgery on a finger on his left hand. He's out for the season. Once those injuries happened, the Spurs said, all right, let's gear up for next year. They're essentially soft tanking, I guess. They're not going to catch a team like the Pelicans or the Jazz, who are so much worse than them in terms of wins and losses. But they are playing for draft picks now, the San Antonio Spurs. But still, they got a couple of quality pieces on their team. Overall, they're 31-42. They've lost 3 games in a row and some really, really tough teams. Detroit, Cleveland, Boston, the 3 teams they just played and lost to. But before that, they had been playing some pretty good basketball. They had won 5 of their previous 7 games. One of those 5 wins came over the Knicks. So this is not a slouch of a basketball team, even without Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. But this is a game that the Warriors, considering what's on the line, this is one that they should be able to win. Now, we said similar things in some other recent Warriors games that they lost. But Steph is back. He played and returned on Friday in the Warriors win in New Orleans. We'll see if he can keep that up and the Warriors can win 2 games in a row in the middle of this 6-game road trip. The Warriors, as I mentioned earlier, they're 42-31. For the moment, they are 6th in the Western Conference. The Clippers just lost in Cleveland, so the Warriors a half game ahead of both the Clippers and the T-Wolves. The 6-7-8, which right now is Warriors, Clippers, T-Wolves. Actually, the T-Wolves have the tiebreaker over the Clippers, so it's Warriors, T-Wolves, Clippers currently 6-7-8. Still, those 3 teams only separated by a half game. The Clippers and T-Wolves, again, both 42 and 32. The T-Wolves won't stay that way because they are playing at 4 o'clock as well as they host Detroit. The Clippers have the tiebreaker versus the Warriors. The Warriors have the tiebreaker versus Minnesota. As a result of that, the Warriors have to finish ahead of the Clippers. In the standings, they have to be a game or better than the Clippers to finish ahead of them. If they are even with Minnesota, they will finish ahead of Minnesota by virtue of the tiebreaker in both those areas. So as a result, I think the Clippers are more of a threat to the Warriors to the 6th seed than the T-Wolves are, but you don't know how the final 9 and 8 games are going to play out for these teams the rest of the season. All right, it's Warriors and it's Spurs coming up in just a little bit here on 95.7 The Game. This is Warriors Live, presented by Xfinity. At home or on the go, you'll get the fastest internet to all of your devices. The Warriors and Spurs have only played once so far this season. If you remember, you got to go all the way back to late November, the 23rd of November. The Warriors lost by 10, 104-94. This was for the Warriors, game number 16 of the season. And that is a significant number. Because you remember, we've thrown out this record, got to be like in the hundreds, if not thousands of times here on 95.7 The Game. The Warriors started this season 12-3, right? Their first 15 games, they were 12-3. Then came game number 16, and that was in San Antonio. And the Warriors were on the doorstep of improving to 13-3, and then all hell broke loose, and the Warriors could not recover, not just in that game against San Antonio, but for the next 2 months of their season. The Warriors led San Antonio, again, in game number 16 of the year, sitting on a 12-3 record. They led San Antonio in San Antonio by 17 points. It was 81-64 Warriors with 1:55 left in the third quarter. Then a 40-13 San Antonio run over the final essentially 14 minutes of game time. The final quarter plus the final 2 minutes of the third quarter. 81-64 Warriors, then 40-13 San Antonio to turn a 17-point lead into a 10-point loss. That's the only matchup of Warriors versus Spurs so far this year. The Warriors play again in San Antonio tonight. Then they host San Antonio on April 9th, the third to last game of the regular season for both these teams. So we will be seeing more of San Antonio before this regular season is over. Despite the loss earlier this year and that rough loss where you led by 17 late in the third, despite that loss, the Warriors have controlled this meeting of late. The Warriors have won 7 of the last 9 versus San Antonio, including 6 of the last 7 in San Antonio. The one moment where they got tripped up was last time in San Antonio. That what I just talked about, the 17-point lead that turned into a 10-point loss over the span of about 14 minutes of game time in San Antonio in late November. But still, this has been a matchup the Warriors have controlled of late. Let's get to our injury report, which is brought to you by Boxer & Gerson, Northern California's premier workers' compensation law firm, helping injured workers get their lives back for over 40 years. For more information, visit boxerlaw.com. First, for the Warriors, Steph Curry, left pelvic contusion, is still listed on the injury report with that pelvic contusion, but he is probable. He played on Friday in New Orleans after missing 2 games. He scored 23 points, grabbed 4 rebounds, dished out 6 assists, was 7 for 21 from the field, 5 of 16 from downtown. I think he was better than those numbers suggest. At least he started off much better. He missed the last handful of shots that he took, but it was a very positive return for Stephen Curry after 2 games missed. He is on the injury report, but is probable and expected to play unless something were to go wrong in the hour before tip-off. But Steph Curry, expect him to play today in San Antonio. The only other Warrior on the injury report today is Gary Payton II. He is out indefinitely after partially tearing a ligament in his left thumb. He'll be reevaluated at some point this coming week. We don't really know how much time he's going to miss. He might miss the rest of the regular season, including tonight's game. There's only 9 games left. So there's not a ton of basketball left to be played. Don't really know how much of that Gary Payton II is going to miss. So that's it for the Warriors. Steph Curry expected to play. GP2 is out, and we don't know when he's going to return just yet. Meanwhile, for the Spurs, they got a couple of big names on the injury report, but as I said off the top, it's no surprise. Victor Wembanyama dealing with deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder, essentially a blood clot. He's out for the season and has been for some time now. De'Aaron Fox also out for the year after undergoing a surgery on a finger on his left hand. He's also been out for the season for quite a bit. Everyone else on the injury report is just G Leaguers and two-way contracts for the Spurs. So everybody else other than Wembanyama and Fox, they are available. So look out for players such as Stephon Castle, the rookie for San Antonio out of UConn. He's going to be expected to carry a lot of the burden offensively. Devin Vassell as well. Their two-guard, Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes. We'll see Jeremy Sohan, a young big for them as well, but no Wembanyama and no De'Aaron Fox for the San Antonio Spurs, and those are a couple of big absences, no doubt, for San Antonio. Keep in mind, I mentioned the Warriors' dominance, I guess, if you will, over San Antonio of late. The Warriors have won 7 of the last 9 meetings against the Spurs, including 6 of the last 7 in San Antonio. They've done it for the most part without an amazing Stephen Curry performance. How about this? Steph Curry versus the Spurs in his career. Steph averages only, and I say only, around 22 points per game because that's how good Steph is. 22 points per game is the average for Steph versus the Spurs in his career. That is Steph's second lowest career scoring average against any opponent. The only team that he scores less against on average in the regular season is the Milwaukee Bucks. Steph averages 21.8 points per game versus Milwaukee in his career, 22 points per game versus the Spurs in his career. And to add to that, San Antonio is one of just 2 teams, Detroit being the other, that Steph has not scored 40 points against in a regular season game. Steph's regular season career high versus the Spurs, 37 points. He's done that twice, but only San Antonio and Detroit have never received a 40 burger from Steph in the regular season. Maybe Steph changes that today, but just thought it was interesting. Steph, second lowest career scoring average in his career comes versus this San Antonio team, only 22 points per game. Again, I say 22 like it's not much. Steph is that good that 22 seems small, seems like not a huge amount, but 22 points per game is Steph's career average versus San Antonio. I was talking about some of the other matchups around the Western Conference earlier today. Let's finish that conversation with our out-of-town NBA game of the night, which is sponsored by the San Francisco International Airport. Wherever your team goes, you can get there from SFO. There are 8 games around the association today, and already one has gone final. Again, Clippers lose in Cleveland, 127-122. That loss means, for the moment, Warriors game is still pending, and also a Minnesota game is still pending. But for the moment, the Warriors are again the 6th seed in the Western Conference, now both a half game up on the Clippers and the T-Wolves as things presently stand. But again, the Warriors game tonight is going to have an impact on how the standings look, and Minnesota is also playing. That's going to have an impact on how the standings look. But 8 games around the association. One has already gone final, the Clippers loss. One of the other games is Pistons and Timberwolves in Minnesota. The Pistons presently have actually jumped to the 7 seed with the Clippers loss because they now have identical records at 42-32, and the T-Wolves have the tiebreaker over the Clippers. So the T-Wolves are essentially the 7 seed now, but it's going to change one way or the other. Well, not necessarily. If they win, they'll stay the 8, or they'll stay the 7. If they lose, they'll jump back to the 8. But the T-Wolves, they're the 7 seed at the moment, half game behind the Warriors, even with the Clippers. The Pistons are one of the best stories in the NBA this year and are 42-32, just like the T-Wolves and the Clippers are, by the way. In the East, the Pistons have essentially locked up a top 6 seed. They could fall anywhere from 4th to 6th, depending on how the final handful of games play out in the East. But they're going to be a postseason team, not just a play-in team, but a postseason team. This game in Minnesota, Wolves and Pistons, tips off at 4 p.m., which is the same time as the Warriors, so it's too late to get there now, but SFO can get you over to Minnesota anytime you want. The Warriors don't play in Minneapolis again this season, but maybe you want to plan a trip there once next season's schedule comes out, and whatever you want, SFO can get you there, no problem at all. And that is the out-of-town NBA Game of the Night, sponsored by the San Francisco International Airport. Wherever your team goes, you can get there from SFO. That is one of 3 games around the West that the Warrior fans have any interest in. One of the others is, as I mentioned already, Clippers in Cleveland. The Clippers have lost, which is great news for the Warriors. Cleveland wins 127-122. Cleveland led by double digits in the fourth quarter. The Clippers got into it, made it interesting down the stretch, but never really had an opportunity to force overtime or to take a lead and to win that game down the stretch. Darius Garland iced it with some free throws, and that was essentially the game. But that loss, again, pushes the Clippers' record to 42-32, and the Warriors at the moment are a half game ahead of the Clippers and are now alone in 6th in the Western Conference. But we are very likely going to see this continue to move, and it might even move tonight because both the Warriors and the T-Wolves are in action. If the Warriors win, they will stay the 6th no matter what anybody else does today. If they lose, they will fall at least to the 7 because the Clippers would then jump past them again. But if Minnesota wins, paired with a Warrior loss, the Warriors will go to bed tonight the 8th seed in the Western Conference, and that is scary because that means you would have a road game in the play-in. If you win that, you are the 7th seed, but if you lose that, then you have to play a win and you're the 8th seed and you get OKC, or lose and your season is over by virtue of the play-in tournament. The Warriors desperately need a win today, and they got to take advantage of that Clippers loss because you don't know how many more Clippers losses you're going to get the rest of the season. But the only other meaningful game around the West tonight, again, Clippers, Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, Warriors in San Antonio. The only other one that matters is Houston in Phoenix. Phoenix is interesting because they're trying to get that 10th spot, which is the 4th and final play-in spot from the Sacramento Kings and also from the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks, by the way, with Anthony Davis back, have won a couple of games in a row. They're currently sitting in 9th, by the way, in the West. The Kings a half game behind Dallas for 10, and then the Suns a game behind the Kings for 11. The Suns still definitely can sneak into the play-in. They would take a big step in that direction with a win tonight versus Houston, and I think Warrior fans should be rooting for Kevin Durant and the Suns in this one. And let me explain to you why. Denver is currently the 3 in the West. Houston is the 2 in the West. Those two teams are separated by 1.5 games. If the Warriors claim the 6, and they would take a big step towards doing that with a win today, if the Warriors are the 6, that means they play the 3 seed in the first round of the postseason. And I think the Warriors would much rather play Houston than Denver. And I think most of you would probably agree with me. I think Warrior fans, and I think the Warriors specifically, match up a little bit better with Houston than they do with Denver. Denver's won 9 consecutive games versus the Warriors. The last 9 times they've played, it has all gone Denver's way. So I think the Warriors would root for Denver to catch Houston, Denver being the 2, Houston being the 3. In order for that to happen, again, there's a 1.5 game difference right now. Houston 1.5 game up on Denver. For that to happen, 1, the Warriors have to be the 6th, which means they got to keep winning, including tonight, and they need Denver to be 2 games better than Houston the rest of the way. And a big step for that could be the Phoenix Suns, led by Kevin Durant, who's playing amazing basketball of late, knocking off the Houston Rockets. And that would mean Denver would only be a game behind Houston, and that would make it a little bit easier. If you're wondering who has the tiebreaker between Houston and Denver, it is up in the air right now. The teams have played twice, they have split, and they have one more game coming up, and it is the final game of the regular season. The Nuggets are in Houston versus the Rockets on Sunday, April 13th, the last day of the NBA regular season. So that 2-3 matchup, it very well might come down to the last game of the season. If those teams are separated by 1 game, or if they're tied going into that last game of the regular season, that last game will determine it. Because if you're within 1 game and the winner of that game also gets the tiebreaker, you win that game and you're a game behind, you're even. You also win the tiebreaker by virtue of winning that game, and then you finish ahead of them. So there's a very real chance, much like Warriors-Clippers at the end of the regular season might be the decider between 6 and 7, there's a possibility that Denver-Houston in Houston, final day of the regular season, is the decider for 2 and 3. So it might be difficult for the Warriors to plan for, who their opponent is and if they want the 6, if they would rather be the 5 in a perfect world, or if there's any chance they would prefer to be the 7. I am personally not in that boat at all. But if a 7 means you have a shot of playing Houston in the first round and avoiding Denver, maybe the Warriors are interested in that. I don't think so. I think they'd rather play anybody in a playoff series than take a chance in the play-in tournament. But the point is, I don't think the Warriors are going to have the ability to really plan that out, considering that the nature of the 2 versus 3 seeding matchup might come down to the very end of the regular season, just like the Warriors race for the 6 versus the 7 might come down to the very last game of the regular season as well. All right, a lot to be talked about there in the standings. I will go through it all again for you on our post-game show, Warriors wrap-up, once this game is over, and we will have a little bit more clarity, of course, because we'll have either a Warriors win or a loss and a T-Wolves win or a loss, and we will have a result in that Houston and Phoenix game as well, and the Western Conference playoff race will continue to take a little bit more shape. Let's get to our Take It to the Bank prediction, which is brought to you by Fremont Bank, full-service banking, no compromises. I will go over 1.5 made three-pointers for Quinton Post tonight. He's made 2 or more in 4 of his last 5 games, and he went 3 for 9 on Friday in New Orleans. Those 9 attempts, though, are really what I'm banking on here, with the number of Warriors shooters like Moses Moody and Brendan Pajemski kind of slumping from downtown of late. I think the Warriors will continue to look for shots for Quinton Post, who hasn't really slumped much at all. By the way, Post leads all rookies, shooting 42.9% from deep this year, making 66 of his 154 attempts. His 66 three-pointers are the most by any Warriors rookie in their first 35 games of their career. Second is Steph Curry with 48. So Quinton Post with 18 more threes in his first 35 career games than Stephen Curry. Of course, a lot of that is because of the nature in which today's NBA game is played, but still pretty impressive stuff there from Quinton Post. So again, I will go over 1.5 made threes for Quinton Post tonight, and that is my Take It to the Bank prediction, which is brought to you by Fremont Bank, full service banking with no compromises. Okay, Warriors are in San Antonio tonight, getting set to do battle with the San Antonio Spurs. Win, and the Warriors would have a full game advantage over over the Los Angeles Clippers. A win and a T-Wolves loss to Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons. The Warriors would be a game up on the Clippers and a game and a half up on Minnesota, and they would have the tiebreaker with Minnesota, which essentially means that 1.5 game advantage is more like a 2.5 game advantage. That would be big if the Warriors can get a couple of results to go their way today. All right. My name is Mark Randy. This has been Warriors Live on 95.7 The Game, presented by Xfinity. At home or on the go, you'll get the fastest internet to all of your devices. I'll be back with you for Warriors wrap-up once this game is over. Plenty to get into, I'm sure, even if this is, as we hope, a ho-hum Warriors victory against a San Antonio team that is 31-42 on the season, and their hopes for any postseason life not technically dashed, but essentially all gone, and they might be more interested in helping out their chances at a high draft pick. We shall see, but Tim Roy is standing by live in San Antonio. He's got the call of tonight's action. The Warriors and the Spurs getting set to do battle in the state of Texas. I'll talk to you after this game is over. This has been Warriors Live. My name is Mark Randy. Warriors, Spurs, it's coming up next right here on 95.7 The Game.
It's game time, Bay Area basketball fans.